"If you clean this ballroom, I'll let you in," sneered the Marquis, but she covered everything in mud. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The bells of Santa Maria del Fiore had not yet finished ringing when the first carriages rolled up the narrow street leading to the Palazzo di Montelupo. Florence, still trembling from winter's chill, gleamed with candlelight reflected on snow and glass. From every corner of the city came whispers about the ball of the season, the one hosted by Marquis Lorenzo di Montelupo, heir to a fortune so old that even his arrogance seemed hereditary. By mid-afternoon, the palace was already alive with servants polishing mirrors, tuning violins, and arranging flowers that had been forced to bloom early in greenhouses. The marble floors shone so brightly that guests could see their faces in them. The Marquis wanted no flaw in sight. He was a man who despised imperfection, particularly in people. He had spent his youth surrounded by flattery, and now wore his cruelty as a sign of refinement. At the palace gate, a figure approached on foot, her skirt hemmed damp from the melting snow. She was not part of the noble crowd. Her dress was plain, her hands chapped, and her hair gathered under a modest kerchief. Yet there was something in the way she walked, straight-backed, unhurried, that made even the doorman hesitate before waving her away. "I am here to see the Marquise," she said, her voice calm but steady. "Tell him that Clara Benedetti asks for an audience." The man stared at her as though she had spoken madness. "The Marquise does not receive peasants, girl. Be gone before the guests arrive." "I will wait," she replied. "You will wait forever, then." "I have waited longer for less," she murmured, and took a step closer to the gate. The commotion drew the attention of a few arriving guests. Two young ladies in silk masks whispered to each other, laughing behind their fans. Their coachman leaned from the carriage window, curious. The doorman, eager to end the spectacle, puffed up his chest. "Move aside, you are blocking the entrance." But Clara did not move. Her eyes lifted toward the windows where music was already echoing faintly. "Tell him," she repeated, "that Clara Benedetti is here." The doorman scoffed, but the name seemed to catch on the wind, carried through the open door toward the grand staircase. A servant nearby overheard and hurried inside. Within moments, a ripple of whispers began to spread among the staff, whispers that reached the ears of the Marquis himself. Lorenzo di Montelupo was standing before a mirror, adjusting his cravat, when his steward approached. "My lord," the man began cautiously, "there is a young woman at the gate. She asks for you by name." The Marquis frowned. "At this hour? What does she want?" "She says she wishes to see you." "And her name?" "Clara Benedetti." The Marquis paused. He had not heard that surname in many years, yet it stirred a faint, unwelcome memory. He turned toward the window and saw, through the falling snow, the outline of a woman standing beneath the lanterns. She looked poor, unremarkably so, and yet something in her posture made him curious. "Let her wait," he said. "I shall go down myself." The grand staircase was already crowded with guests greeting one another. The Marquis descended with practiced grace, his expression one of indulgent amusement. When he reached the door, the servant stepped aside. The murmurs grew louder. It was rare for him to address anyone so far beneath his rank. "Well," he said as he approached, his tone smooth as marble, "what an interesting sight. A peasant at my gate, and on the night of my ball. Tell me, Signorina Benedetti, do you always appear uninvited at noble houses?" Clara met his gaze without flinching. "Only when there is a debt left unpaid." The guests near the entrance tittered. The Marquis tilted his head, intrigued. "A debt, you say? I do not recall owing anything to your kind." "Perhaps not you," she said softly, "but the House of Montelupo does." A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. The Marquis gave a short laugh. "How dramatic. Shall I assume you've come to collect it now? On this very evening?" "I came because tonight all of Florence will be here," Clara answered. "And truth hides less easily when the lights are bright." Her calmness unsettled him. For a moment he considered ordering her removal, but the murmurs among the guests pleased his vanity. Nothing delighted the bored nobility more than a public scene. He decided to entertain them. You wish to enter my ball? He asked, voice dripping with irony. You wish to walk among dukes and countesses in that costume? I wish to speak where I can be heard, she said. The Marquis turned toward the guests, spreading his arms as though on a stage. Then let us strike a bargain, shall we? I am not an unkind man. Laughter bubbled around him. If you clean this ballroom before the first candle is lit, you may attend as a guest. You will, of course, begin at once. The marble has grown dull from too many steps. The crowd laughed harder, delighted by his cruelty. Clara's face did not change. She looked at the hall behind him, the crystal chandeliers, the polished floor, and then back at his mocking eyes. So that is your condition? Yes, he said lightly. A fair exchange. Your labor for a night among the finest of Florence. Surely you are not above work. Not above it, she said, her voice even. Nor beneath truth. The silence that followed was sharp. Some ladies looked away, embarrassed by her composure. The Marquis, sensing his authority challenged, smiled again, but his tone tightened. Then we are agreed. You have until sunset. If you fail, you will leave and never again trouble my house. She nodded once. Agreed. Without another word, she stepped past him and disappeared down the servants' corridor. The nobles burst into laughter again, but their amusement was thinner now, almost nervous. The Marquis waved them toward the ballroom. Come, my friends. Let us not allow a cleaning girl to delay our pleasures. As the music began, he tried to forget her. But something about her manner, her refusal to beg, lingered in his mind. Each time he lifted a glass or turned in dance, he thought he saw her quiet eyes watching him. When a servant crossed the hall carrying a bucket, his glance flickered involuntarily, half expecting to see her behind it. Down in the lower quarters, Clara worked in silence. Servants whispered among themselves, unsure whether to pity or admire her. She took no offense at their curiosity. She scrubbed the steps, fetched water, and polished the brass fittings, not hurriedly, but with deliberate calm. The steward, passing by, muttered that she would never finish before dark. Clara only smiled faintly. That is not my aim. By the time the sun began to set behind the hills, the palace glowed with hundreds of candles. The orchestra tuned their strings, and guests filled the ballroom with a rustle of silk and chatter. The Marquis, now restored to good humor, stood at the top of the staircase, welcoming new arrivals. He had almost forgotten the episode entirely. Then one of his servants leaned close to whisper something. The girl, my lord. She has returned. He frowned. Returned? From where? She left through the garden gate an hour ago, and now she is back. The Marquis's amusement returned. Excellent. The entertainment continues. He followed the servant to the main entrance, expecting to find her exhausted and humiliated. Instead, when the doors opened, a gust of cold air swept in, and there she stood, Clara Benedetti, drenched in mud from the road, her skirts heavy with it, her hands brown with earth. The servants froze. The nobles gasped, yet she walked forward slowly, leaving a trail of wet footprints across the marble. What in heaven's name is this? The Marquis demanded, descending the steps. Have you lost your mind? I told you to clean, not to wallow in the fields. Clara stopped in the middle of the hall, her bucket still in her hand. I have done as you ordered, she said. I have brought the earth that feeds your vineyards, the same earth your servants tread upon when they harvest the grapes that fill your cup. You told me to clean your ballroom before the candles were lit, and so I shall. Before anyone could stop her, she dipped her hand into the bucket and flung a thick handful of mud across the gleaming floor. A dark stain spread over the marble. The crowd gasped, as though witnessing a crime. Then she threw another and another, each stroke deliberate, each splash louder than the music that had died away. The Marquis's face turned white. Stop her, now! But the servants hesitated, uncertain. Clara's calmness had turned to something fierce yet controlled. You wanted me to scrub away the dirt, she said. But it lies deeper than marble, my lord. A murmur spread among the guests. Who is she? Someone whispered. Did she say Benedetti? I remember that name. The Marquis tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. Enough of this nonsense. You are dismissed, girl. I will leave, she replied quietly, when I have finished. Her hands moved again, spreading mud along the edges of the walls, over the embroidered rugs, along the golden frames. Every motion seemed to accuse him. The nobles, fascinated despite themselves, could not look away. The hall that had glittered moments before now seemed to reveal its hidden filth, the cruelty behind the laughter, the arrogance beneath the polish. "Do you know what you have done?" the Marquis hissed. "You have destroyed what you could never possess." Clara met his eyes. "I have reminded you that marble cracks like any other stone." The silence that followed was heavy. The only sound was the dripping of mud onto the floor. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled faintly over the hills. Then, from the far end of the hall, the butler rushed in, breathless. "My lord," he said, "a carriage from Rome has just arrived. Count Alessandro Varani asks to see you." The Marquis blinked, startled. "Varani? At this hour?" The butler nodded, his eyes darting toward Clara. For the first time, the Marquis looked uncertain. His lips parted as though to speak, but before he could, the grand doors swung open again, and a tall figure stepped inside, removing his gloves. His voice carried clearly across the shocked room. "Clara Benedetti, is that truly you?" Gasps rippled through the ballroom. The name sounded like a chord struck too hard. Count Alessandro Varani, tall and composed in his dark traveling coat, stood beneath the arched doorway. His arrival carried an authority that silenced even the whispers. He looked not at the Marquis or the shocked nobility, but straight at Clara, standing in the center of the hall, mud still dripping from her hands. "Clara Benedetti," he said again, stepping forward. "You look so much like her." The nobles shifted, murmuring among themselves. The Marquis's expression hardened. "Count Varani," he said with forced civility. "What an unexpected honor. You arrive in the middle of a small domestic misunderstanding." Alessandro's eyes never left Clara. "It looks like more than misunderstanding, my lord. It looks like humiliation." He crossed the floor, ignoring the ruined marble and the gasps of the guests, and stopped before her. "Do you remember me?" he asked gently. Clara hesitated, her breath unsteady. "No," she said. "But my mother did. She spoke of you when I was a child. She said there was one man who believed her when no one else would." The Marquis took a step forward, his smile tightening. "Enough of this nonsense. Count, you cannot know this woman. She is a vagrant, a performer of cheap drama." Alessandro turned toward him, his tone calm but sharp. "I know her name, and her mother's, Lucia Benedetti. Do you remember her, Marquis?" A ripple of recognition ran through the crowd. The older guests exchanged uneasy glances. Some remembered a scandal from years ago, a servant accused of theft, dismissed in disgrace. The Marquis lifted his chin. "I remember a servant who betrayed the trust of my household. A thief, nothing more." "A thief?" Alessandro's voice cut like glass. "Lucia Benedetti was no thief. She was accused, yes, by your father's word alone. And the item she was said to have stolen was never found." The Marquis laughed stiffly. "Count, I fear you are letting sentiment cloud your reason. My father's word was law in this city." "Law and justice are not the same," Alessandro replied. The guests began whispering louder. The musicians, uncertain, lowered their instruments. Clara stood still, watching the exchange with quiet intensity. "My mother died still branded a criminal," she said. "I have lived with that name on my shoulders all my life. Tonight I wanted to look the men who ruined her in the eye." The Marquis's composure began to crack. "Ruined her? She ruined herself. Did she?" Clara asked. "Or was she accused so that your father could keep the land she inherited? The vineyard near San Casciano?" The room stirred again. The Marquis's face paled, then flushed dark red. "You know nothing of that. Those lands were forfeited to pay debts. They were taken," Clara said quietly. "And my mother's reputation was the price." A countess near the stairs clutched her pearls. Someone whispered, "Could it be true?" And another replied, "Hush, he'll hear you." Alessandro's gaze swept the crowd, his voice firm. There were letters. Lucia wrote to me before she vanished. I never received them, but I know she tried to reach me. She wrote of false witnesses, of threats, of being dismissed without pay. I searched for her when I returned from Rome, but she was gone. Clara swallowed hard. She died in silence, but not in shame. She told me once that truth always returns, even if it must walk through mud to be seen. The Marquis moved toward her, his steps echoing on the ruined marble. You dare to accuse my house in front of Florence's finest? You think anyone will believe a peasant girl's word over mine? Not my word, Clara said. My mother's. And perhaps soon, others. His jaw clenched. You think you can disgrace me? I think you have already done that yourself, Alessandro interjected. Look around you. These people came for music and wine, but they will leave remembering this. The noble house of Montelupo, frightened by a peasant and her truth. The Marquis's eyes flicked toward the guests. Their expressions had changed. Amusement had turned to discomfort, curiosity to doubt. His voice dropped to a hiss. You meddle where you have no right, Varani. Whatever affection you had for that servant woman is ancient gossip. Do not drag it into my house. Alessandro's tone remained calm. Then open your archives. Show us the report of the theft, the witnesses, the recovery of the so-called stolen jewel. If everything was lawful, you have nothing to fear. The Marquis's lips curved in a brittle smile. And if I refuse, then your refusal will speak for itself, Alessandro said. The silence that followed was heavy. Clara's heart pounded, but she held her ground. Around her, the nobles avoided each other's eyes, uncertain which side to stand on. The Marquis exhaled slowly, forcing a laugh. This conversation has grown tedious. Clara Benedetti, you have had your spectacle. Leave my house at once. Clara turned toward the door, but her voice carried clearly across the hall. I will leave, my lord, but not quietly. Tomorrow, Florence will hear my mother's name again. Tomorrow, the Marquis echoed. And what will you bring them, girl? Your stories, your memories. Proof, Clara said. The word struck like a bell. The crowd stirred again. The Marquis narrowed his eyes. You lie. Do I? Clara asked. Then perhaps you will sleep soundly tonight. But if I were you, I would not. Her calm tone infuriated him more than any insult could have. If you think this little performance will gain you sympathy, you are mistaken, he said. Florence does not forgive insolence. Nor does it forgive deceit, Alessandro replied. The Marquis glared at him. You speak boldly for a guest in my house. I speak as a man who has seen too much injustice dressed as elegance, the Count answered. Perhaps the people of Florence should know that not every noble defends corruption. The tension thickened. One of the guests, an older magistrate, coughed awkwardly. My lords, perhaps this matter is better settled privately. But Clara shook her head. No. For years, everything about my mother was hidden behind closed doors. Tonight, I wanted it spoken under the chandeliers, where secrets pretend to shine. The Marquis's hand trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of wine. You will regret this, he muttered. Perhaps, she said. But at least I will regret it honestly. Alessandro looked at her with quiet admiration. If you have proof, I will help you bring it forward, he said. You have my word. She glanced at him, uncertain whether to trust. Why would you help me? You owe me nothing. I owe your mother everything I failed to do for her, he said softly. The sincerity in his tone silenced even the most cynical guests. The Marquis's grip on the glass tightened until it cracked in his hand. He barely noticed the blood that followed, only the stares fixed on him. Clara stepped back. You see, Marquis, even marble can bleed. He dropped the glass, the fragments scattering across the floor. Get her out, he commanded the servants. Now, but no one moved. The servants, bound by fear, yet moved by something like respect, hesitated. One of them murmured, She has done no harm, my lord. No harm? The Marquis repeated, trembling with anger. She has soiled my house, my name. She has revealed them, Alessandro interrupted quietly. The Marquis turned to him, his eyes wild. You will regret standing against me. I have regretted worse, Alessandro said. I will stand with her. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension was a living thing, curling through the air. Clara looked around at the faces, the guests who had mocked her hours ago now watching in unease. Then she set the bucket down beside her, straightened her back, and said clearly, "You told me to clean your ballroom, my lord. I have. I cleaned it of its silence." She turned and walked toward the doors. No one stopped her. The mud on her dress left streaks along the floor as she went, marks that no servant dared to wipe away. At the threshold, she looked back once. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice steady, "I will return with what you fear most." The Marquis stared after her, his jaw tight. "And what is that?" he asked. "The truth," she answered. Then she stepped into the night, the cold air rushing in behind her. The music did not resume. Guests whispered, unsure whether to stay or flee. The Marquis stood motionless, fury and doubt twisting beneath his elegant mask. Alessandro watched her disappear through the gates, and then turned back to him. "You think this is over?" the Marquis asked, low and dangerous. "No," Alessandro said. "It is just beginning." The Marquis forced a thin smile. "Then we shall see, tomorrow, who Florence believes." Alessandro bowed slightly. "Indeed, we shall." Outside, the wind carried Clara's footsteps down the cobblestone street, fading into silence. Inside, the ballroom remained half-lit, its floor smeared with the traces of mud that gleamed under the chandeliers like tarnished gold. Guests began to murmur again, softly at first, then louder, their curiosity mingled with unease. Some slipped away quietly, unwilling to meet the Marquis's eyes. He stood in the center of the wrecked splendor, breathing hard, and whispered to himself, "Proof? What proof could she have?" But deep inside, beneath layers of arrogance and fear, a memory stirred. A locked drawer, a forgotten bundle of letters, a seal that once bore his father's crest. He turned toward the door as though the ghosts of his own house had begun to walk again. He caught sight of Alessandro, still standing near the entrance. "Stay away from her," he said in a low voice. "This family does not forgive." Alessandro met his gaze calmly. "Then it will fall by its own hand." The Marquis said nothing. The orchestra's instruments lay silent, their strings still vibrating faintly in the heavy air. From somewhere in the courtyard came the distant sound of a carriage door closing. The nobles began to leave one by one, whispering as they went, their voices echoing down the marble hallways. Florence would wake tomorrow to gossip that burned hotter than any scandal in years. Some would mock the peasant girl, others would defend her, but none would forget her. The Marquis turned toward the emptying ballroom, his reflection fractured in the muddy marble. The lights flickered. For the first time, he felt the weight of his father's sins pressing against him like a shadow he could not shake. And outside, under the cold Florentine sky, Clara walked alone toward the river, whispering to herself, "Tomorrow, they will see what was hidden." Dawn crept over Florence, pale and cold, washing the rooftops with mist. The city still murmured with the scandal from the night before. Servants carried gossip faster than letters, and by morning, every market stall and cafe knew the story of the peasant girl who had thrown mud in the Marquis's ballroom. Some called her mad, others called her brave. No one agreed on the details, only that she had spoken of debts, shame, and a truth long buried beneath marble floors. Clara heard the whispers as she crossed the Ponte Vecchio, her cloak drawn tight against the wind. Her hands were red from the cold, but her eyes were bright. She had not slept. She had spent the night at the edge of the river, thinking of her mother's voice, her mother's letters, the sealed box hidden in the old cottage outside the city. Now it was time to open it. The proof she had spoken of was real, though even she did not yet know what power it carried. At the same hour, Count Alessandro Varani entered a cafe near Piazza Santa Trinita. The nobles who saw him bowed but avoided meeting his eyes. No one wanted to be the first to speak of last night. He ordered nothing, only waited, his gloved hands folded on the table. He had not come to eat. He had come to listen. When the steward of the Montelupo household slipped through the door, nervous and pale, Alessandro motioned him to sit. "You served the Marquis's father, didn't you?" Alessandro asked quietly. "I did, my lord, for 20 years. "Then you remember Lucia Benedetti?" The man nodded, his eyes darting toward the window. Everyone remembers her, though no one speaks of it. She was accused of theft, Alessandro continued. But what was stolen? A diamond brooch. The old Marquis claimed it vanished from his wife's dressing room. Did they ever find it? The steward hesitated. No, my lord. But a few months later, the old Marquis's debts were paid. His fortune seemed to recover overnight. Some said he had sold land, others whispered it was the brooch. None of us dared ask. Alessandro leaned forward. Where were the records kept? In the study. The drawer that never opened. Only the family seal could unlock it. The man hesitated, lowering his voice. And last night, the Marquis broke it open. I saw him. Alessandro's jaw tightened. When? After the guests left. He dismissed everyone, locked the doors, and worked until dawn. He burned papers in the fireplace. Alessandro rose at once. You have done well to tell me. Say nothing to anyone. The steward bowed, trembling. What will you do, my lord? Finish what should have been done years ago, Alessandro said, and left. Meanwhile, Clara had reached the cottage where her mother had lived her final years. The small house leaned against a hill, its walls covered in ivy. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and dust. She went to the hearth where her mother's sewing chest still stood. Beneath layers of folded cloth lay a wooden box bound with string. Clara's hands shook as she untied it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in her mother's careful hand, all addressed to Count Varani in Rome. None had been sent. The wax seals were unbroken. She sat by the window and began to read. Each letter told a story she already knew in pieces, but had never fully understood. Her mother had been accused of stealing the brooch after refusing to sign over her late husband's vineyard to the Marquis's father. She had been dismissed without pay, branded a thief, and blacklisted from every household in Florence. One letter spoke of fear, another of hope. The last, written in shaking script, said only, I no longer ask for justice, only that my daughter know the truth. Tears blurred the words. Clara closed the box and pressed her forehead against the wood. You will have justice, Mama, she whispered. I promise you. By the time the church bells rang noon, she was already walking toward the Varani residence. When she arrived, Alessandro met her at the gate, as though he had been waiting all morning. You found them, he said the moment he saw the box in her hands. I did, she answered. Every word she tried to send you. They went inside. The drawing room was modest for a nobleman's house, lined with books and maps. Clara placed the box on the table and lifted the lid. Alessandro picked up one letter, breaking the seal carefully. He read in silence, his expression hardening with every line. She wrote of witnesses, he said at last. A clerk named Fiori, a lawyer called Belandi. Both were paid to sign statements they never saw. Are they still alive? Clara asked. Fiori is. I know the name. He works in the court registry. Then he must speak, she said. He will, if I ask him, Alessandro replied. He folded the letter carefully, his voice quiet. Lucia was innocent. These letters are proof enough. Before they could say more, a servant entered hurriedly. My lord, a messenger from the Montelupo estate. Alessandro frowned. Send him in. The messenger bowed deeply, eyes downcast. My lord Marquis requests your presence at his residence. He wishes to discuss last night's events in private. Clara looked at Alessandro. It's a trap. Perhaps, he said, but I must go. If he destroyed anything last night, I need to see it myself. I'm coming with you. No, he said quickly. If he realizes you have the letters, he will stop at nothing to take them. I won't hide, Clara insisted. My mother hid, and it killed her. He looked at her, torn between admiration and fear. Then we go together, he said at last. But stay close to me. The carriage ride to the Montelupo palace was silent. The city blurred past, alive with winter light. When they arrived, the doors opened before they could knock. The Marquis was waiting in the grand hall, his usual elegance dulled by sleeplessness. He greeted Alessandro with forced politeness, his eyes darting to Clara. So, the Crusader and his accomplice return, he said. Come, let us end this farce. He led them into the study. The air smelled faintly of smoke. The fireplace was cold, filled with ashes. On the desk lay scattered documents and the remains of broken seals. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. "You've been busy, my lord." "I have nothing to hide," the Marquis replied. "Only the patience to endure insults in my own home. Then you won't mind explaining what you burned." "Old records," he said. "Irrelevant papers. My father's debts." "And his lies?" Clara asked softly. The Marquis turned on her. "Be silent, girl. You have already dirtied my floors with mud. Must you now dirty my name with gossip?" "It isn't gossip," she said, stepping forward. "It's written in her hand." She placed one of the letters on the desk. The Marquis froze. Alessandro took another and set it beside the first. "Lucia Benedetti wrote these before she died," he said. "She names your father and his men. She describes the forgery. The seal on this letter matches your family's own." The Marquis's jaw clenched. "Where did you get these?" "They were hidden," Clara said. "She feared they would be destroyed." He forced a laugh, though his eyes betrayed panic. "This proves nothing. Words written by a servant. Convenient stories by a woman desperate to clear her name." "Then let the magistrates decide," Alessandro said. "If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. I will not have my family dragged through the courts by peasants. Then the city will hear it instead," Alessandro replied. The Marquis's composure broke. "Do you think anyone will believe her? You, Count Varani, risk your reputation for the daughter of a servant." "I risk it gladly," he said, "because truth does not wear a title." The words hung in the air like thunder. The Marquis looked at Clara again, his face pale. "You do not know what you are inviting, girl. Florence forgets quickly, but it also punishes. When the whispers turn against you, no nobleman will defend you." Clara met his gaze without fear. "I need no defense. My mother's name is all I came to restore." Alessandro turned to her. "Come. There is nothing more to say." As they left the room, the Marquis called after them. "If you bring this before the magistrate, you will destroy yourself." Clara stopped at the door. "No, my lord. I will free myself." They left the palace without another word. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, gleaming on the rooftops like a promise. Alessandro helped her into the carriage, his hand lingering for a moment on hers. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "I only spoke what she could not." They rode in silence until they reached the courthouse. Inside, the registry was nearly empty. Alessandro asked for Signor Fiori, the clerk mentioned in the letters. A thin man with spectacles appeared from behind a stack of ledgers. When he saw Alessandro, he bowed. "My Lord Count, how may I serve you?" "You can begin," Alessandro said, placing one of the letters before him. "By telling the truth." Fiori read the letter, his face paling. "Where did you find this?" "In Lucia Benedetti's own hand," Alessandro replied. "You signed a statement accusing her of theft. Did you witness the act?" The man hesitated, trembling. "No, my lord. I was told to sign. The old Marquis himself demanded it. He said the servant had confessed." "She never did," Clara said softly. Fiori looked at her, guilt written across his face. "I knew. But to refuse a Montelupo was to lose my position. I had a family. Forgive me." "Will you swear this before the magistrate?" Alessandro asked. The clerk nodded weakly. "Yes. It is time the truth is known." When they left the courthouse, the bells were ringing for vespers. Clara felt the first real breath of relief she had taken in years. "It's over," she said quietly. "Not yet," Alessandro answered. "The Marquis will not yield easily. But Florence will listen now." She looked up at him. "You've done more for us than I ever could have asked." "I should have done it long ago," he said. "If I had believed your mother then." "She forgave you," Clara said. "She always hoped you'd find the truth one day." He smiled faintly. "And you brought it to me." They walked together through the square, past the evening crowds. For a moment, the world seemed lighter. Then a servant approached, breathless. "My Lord Count, news from the Palazzo di Montelupo. The Marquis has called a meeting of his peers. He means to declare you both liars before all of Florence." Alessandro's face darkened. When? Tomorrow, at noon. Clara's hands tightened around the box. Then tomorrow, she said, we bring everything. Alessandro nodded. Let him speak first. We will finish it. The servant bowed and hurried away. The Count turned to her, his voice low. Are you afraid? Only of silence, she said. I've lived too long beneath it. That night she stayed in a guest room at his house. She could not sleep. From the window, she saw the lights of Florence flicker on the river, each reflection like a memory rising from the dark. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, the Marquis plotted his defense, and in the quiet between the bells, Clara whispered to the night, Tomorrow, Mamma. Tomorrow, they will hear you. At dawn, the streets filled with rumor again. People crowded near the Montelupo Palace, waiting for spectacle. The Marquis stood on the steps, pale and trembling with fury, declaring that his family was under attack by a common liar aided by a misguided noble. His words echoed through the square, but the crowd listened without conviction. When Clara and Alessandro arrived, the murmurs swelled. She stepped forward, the wooden box in her arms. The Marquis froze at the sight of it. You dare bring that here? Truth does not ask permission, she said. The magistrate appeared, flanked by guards, demanding silence. Alessandro handed over the letters and Fiore's signed confession. The square held its breath as the magistrate read. When he finished, he turned to the Marquis, his tone cold. My lord, these documents bear your family's seal and the signature of a man who admits perjury at your father's command. What say you? The Marquis said nothing. His throat worked, but no sound came. The magistrate raised the letters high for all to see. The charges against Lucia Benedetti are hereby declared false. Her name is cleared before the city of Florence. Cheers rose from the crowd. Clara closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. Alessandro touched her shoulder gently, but she could not speak. Above the noise, the Marquis stumbled backward, his face drained of color. The glory of his house cracked like the marble beneath his feet. He turned toward Clara, his voice a rasp. You think this brings you victory? She opened her eyes, calm once more. No, my lord. It brings you truth. He stared at her, breathing hard, and whispered, You will regret this. I already have, she said. Now it's your turn. The crowd parted as she and Alessandro walked away. Behind them, the Marquis sank against the gate, surrounded by murmuring nobles whose faces no longer held respect, but pity. As they reached the carriage, Alessandro turned to her. It's done. Clara looked back at the palace, now dim beneath the winter sun. No, she said softly. It's only just beginning. The winter sun lingered behind clouds as Florence stirred to new gossip. The trial, the confession, the fall of the Montelupos. It was all anyone could speak of. In the cafes and market stalls, people repeated Clara's name as though it belonged to a legend. But in the quiet streets near Santa Maria Novella, far from the noise, Clara walked with her head lowered, feeling no triumph, only calm exhaustion. She had not come to destroy. She had come to mend what was broken. Now that her mother's honor was restored, she felt a strange emptiness, as though she had returned a key, but lost the door it once opened. She entered the cloister garden, where orange trees bloomed despite the cold. Alessandro was already there, waiting under an archway. His dark coat contrasted with the pale stone behind him. When he saw her, he smiled, though his eyes held the same weariness she felt. It's quiet here, he said. The only place in Florence untouched by talk. Talk fades, she answered. The truth stays. He nodded. I wanted to see you before I leave for Rome. She looked up sharply. Leave? Only for a short time, he said. The magistrate's decision must be confirmed by the council. I've been asked to testify about the letters and the forgery. It will end the matter for good. Clara nodded slowly. Then it's over. For the city, yes, he said. But not for you. What will you do now? I don't know, she said honestly. The vineyard that was stolen belongs to me again, they say. But I have never managed land. I know only how to work the soil with my hands. That is enough, he said. The land remembers those who love it. She smiled faintly. You speak like someone who's walked among vines. I have, he said. When I was young, before titles made me restless. I sometimes think nobility is a cage built of manners. And you? She asked. You don't seem the kind to be caged. Until recently, I was, he admitted. I obeyed what was expected of me, just as your mother once did. But courage, when it finally stands before you, demands to be followed. I saw that in her, and in you. The wind moved through the arches, carrying the faint scent of citrus. They stood in silence for a while, each aware of what the other did not say. Finally, she spoke. When you go to Rome, they will praise you. You will be the man who exposed the Montelupos. He shook his head. They will praise the evidence. I only carried it forward. You believed in it, she said. That is more than most men have done. He met her eyes. Clara, what you did was extraordinary. Florence will remember it long after our names fade. She looked down. I didn't do it for remembrance. No, he said quietly. You did it for love. The word startled her. Love, the love of truth, the love of your mother, the kind that redeems, not destroys. She wanted to speak, but words failed. Instead, she lifted the small wooden box from her satchel. I wanted you to have this, she said. The letters, they were meant for you. He hesitated. They belong to you. They belong to her, she said. And she wrote them to you. I think she wanted you to read them when the world was ready to listen. He accepted the box with both hands. Then I will guard them as she wished. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something tender, fragile, and heavy with meaning. Then he said, When I return from Rome, I will visit your vineyard. She smiled softly. If it still stands. It will, he said. And when I come, I hope you'll let me see how you've tamed it. Tamed, she laughed quietly. No one tames the land. One learns to live with it. That, he said, is what I wish to learn. They began walking through the cloister, their steps slow. The nuns who tended the garden passed by in silence, glancing curiously at the unlikely pair. One of them, an older sister, paused and murmured, Peace follows those who forgive. Clara inclined her head, uncertain whether the words were meant for her or for the man beside her. After a moment, Alessandro said, Do you forgive him? The Marquis? She asked. I don't know. I should, but every time I see his face, I see my mother leaving that house with nothing. Forgiveness doesn't erase what was done, he said. It only frees the one who gives it. She looked at him, curious. Have you forgiven yourself? He hesitated. Not yet. I was young, and I let fear silence me. I believed power would protect truth, but it only buried it deeper. I failed your mother. She never blamed you, Clara said softly. She told me once that if you had been there, things might have ended differently. He smiled faintly. And now, years later, her daughter stands where she could not. Perhaps fate allows us second chances through others. The bells began to toll for afternoon prayers. Clara looked toward the sound. You should leave soon if you're to reach the road before night. He nodded. Will you come to see me off? Yes. They walked together to the edge of the convent gate where his carriage waited. The driver stood ready, holding the reins. Alessandro turned to her one last time. If the vineyard overwhelms you, write to me. I will come. I will manage, she said, smiling. I've faced worse than soil. He laughed quietly. Then I shall see you soon, Signorina Benedetti. As the carriage pulled away, Clara watched until it disappeared around the corner. The city felt larger, emptier without him. She turned back toward the garden, her mind full of memories. Her mother's laughter, the feel of earth between her fingers, the echo of Alessandro's voice saying that forgiveness frees. The following weeks passed quickly. The court confirmed the ruling. The Montelupos were stripped of influence, and Florence returned to its restless rhythm. People spoke less of scandal and more of renewal. Clara spent her days in the vineyard, the land stretching like a quiet promise beyond the hills. It had been neglected for years, but she loved its stubbornness. Each vine, bent and half dead, reminded her that life could return after winter. One afternoon, A messenger arrived carrying a letter sealed with the Varani crest. Clara opened it eagerly. The letter was short. The council has closed the matter. Justice is done. I return to Florence within the week. I hope the vineyard is as strong as the woman who now owns it. A.V. She read the words several times before tucking the letter close to her heart. The following days, she prepared without realizing why. She cleaned the small house, mended her best dress, arranged flowers from the field. When she caught herself smiling, she shook her head and whispered, "Foolish girl." But the smile did not fade. The day Alessandro returned was bright and clear. He rode alone, without carriage or servants, his horse dusty from the road. Clara saw him from the hill and walked down to meet him. When he dismounted, his eyes lit up. "It looks different," he said, gazing at the vineyard. "It's trying to live again," she replied. "Like all of us." He looked at her for a long moment. "I've missed speaking with you." She laughed softly. "You've been gone only a month." A month can be long when one grows used to someone's company. She felt the warmth rise in her cheeks. "And Rome? They treated you well?" "They treated me like a curiosity," he said. "A noble defending a peasant's cause. It confuses people. But I told them what they needed to hear, that nobility means nothing without integrity." "And they believed you?" "Some did," he said. "The rest pretended to." He walked with her through the rows of vines, his gloved hand brushing the leaves. "These will bear fruit again next season," he said. "Your mother would have loved this place." "She planted half of it," Clara said. "The earth remembers her." He turned to her, his expression tender. "And so do you." They reached the end of the field where the old olive tree stood, its branches twisted but strong. There, Alessandro stopped. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "Before I left Rome, the magistrate asked me to take a position with the council. They want me to oversee land disputes, cases like yours." She smiled. "Then others will have justice too." "I hope so," he said. "But I am not sure I can do it alone. The law can punish wrongdoing, but it cannot heal the wounded. You, Clara, have done that better than any court." She shook her head. "I only wanted peace. Peace comes from truth," he said. "And you brought it." They stood under the olive tree, the sunlight slipping through the branches. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Clara said quietly, "You have changed, Count." "So have you," he said. "You are no longer the girl who walked into a ballroom of marble. You stand on your own land now." She looked at him steadily. "And you are no longer the man who watched injustice and turned away." He smiled. "Perhaps we have both been freed." A breeze stirred the vines, carrying the faint scent of earth and renewal. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the quiet pulse of the land beneath her feet. When she opened them, Alessandro was watching her with a gentleness that made her heart tremble. "Clara," he said softly, "may I ask you something? Not as a nobleman to a peasant, but as one soul to another." She waited. "When I return from my duties, when your vines bear fruit again, will you allow me to share this place with you? Not as a guest, but as a friend, perhaps more than a friend, if your heart allows." She was silent, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "I don't know what the world would say." "The world has said too much already," he replied. "Let it speak of truth for once." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Then come back when the first grapes ripen. If you still wish to ask me then, I will have an answer." He bowed his head slightly. "Then I will wait for harvest." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the vineyard. They walked back toward the cottage in companionable silence. At the gate, Alessandro turned once more. "You have given Florence a story it will tell for generations," he said. "But more than that, you have given it a conscience." Clara looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "And you have given me faith in kindness again." They said goodbye quietly, without ceremony. As he rode away, she watched until the dust of his horse vanished beyond the hills. Then she turned back to the vineyard, her heart steady and full. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt truly at peace. That night, the wind carried the scent of rain. Clara stood at the window, the vines stretching into darkness, and whispered, "Forgive me, Mama. I forgive them." The words felt like a blessing released into the night, In the morning, when the first drops fell, she stepped outside and lifted her face to the sky, letting the rain wash over her hands. It felt like the earth itself had begun to breathe again. And somewhere on the road to Rome, Alessandro looked back once toward the hills of Tuscany and murmured, "When the harvest comes, I will return." Summer came to Tuscany with the sound of cicadas and the scent of ripening grapes. The vineyard that had once been dry and twisted now glowed green under the sun. The vines, heavy with fruit, bent toward the earth as though bowing in gratitude. Clara moved among them with a basket in her hands, her hair loosened by the wind, her skirt brushing the rows of leaves. It had been months since Alessandro's departure, months of quiet work, of slow renewal. She had learned to live by the rhythm of the land, to wake with the first light, to trust in the soil that had once betrayed her family. The people of the nearby village had grown used to seeing her in the fields. They no longer called her the girl from the scandal. They called her Signora Benedetti, the lady who spoke kindly and worked harder than anyone else. She never corrected them. Titles meant little. Peace meant everything. But sometimes at sunset, she would pause on the hill and look toward the road that curved from Florence to Rome. She told herself she was only watching the horizon, but her heart always waited for a sound. The echo of hooves, the voice that had promised to return when the grapes ripened. That evening, the harvest began. Men and women filled the vineyard, their laughter rising above the hum of insects. Clara moved among them, guiding, helping, laughing with them. The air smelled of crushed fruit and promise. Yet beneath her calm, she felt a restlessness she could not name. When the last baskets were filled and the sky began to turn gold, a rider appeared on the distant road. The workers paused, shading their eyes. Clara's hands stilled. She knew that figure long before she could see his face. The way he rode, steady, unhurried, as if following a memory, was enough. She stepped forward, her heart beating fast. The rider dismounted at the gate and handed the reins to a boy. Dust clung to his coat, and travel had tanned his skin, but the eyes, those same clear, searching eyes, met hers with quiet joy. "I told you I'd come for the harvest," Alessandro said. "You're late," she replied, smiling despite the tremor in her voice. "The grapes nearly finished without you." "Then I arrived just in time," he said. "I could not let the vines celebrate alone." She laughed softly. "Florence must miss you." "Let it," he answered. "I've served the council long enough. They can judge disputes without me for a season." He took a slow step closer, his gaze sweeping the vineyard. "It's beautiful," he said. "You've done what even I doubted could be done." "It wasn't only me," she said. "The land wanted to live again. And you gave it courage," he said. "You always did." They walked through the rows together, the workers watching from a distance before drifting away, leaving them alone in the long golden light. Clara showed him the vines that had returned strongest, the barrels ready for pressing, the little house she had repaired with her own hands. "It feels different here," he said. "Lighter." "It is," she answered. "For the first time, this land isn't haunted." They reached the olive tree at the edge of the field, the one that had seen their last conversation. Its leaves shimmered in the setting sun. Alessandro stopped beneath it, removing his gloves. "Do you remember what I said here?" "You said you'd wait for harvest," she said softly. "And you said you'd have an answer." She looked at him, her heart fluttering. "And if I have one?" He smiled faintly. "Then speak it before the sun goes down." She drew a slow breath. "I thought I wanted only justice, Alessandro. But when justice came, I realized it wasn't enough. What I wanted was life. Life that felt true, not bound by shame or pride. When you stood beside me that night, you gave me that. And since then, every day has felt whole." He stepped closer. "Clara," she raised her eyes, "if you still wish to share this vineyard, not as a noble, but as the man who believed when no one else would, then yes. My answer is yes." He exhaled, a sound half laugh, half relief. "Then I will never leave again." She smiled through tears. "You will. You'll go to Rome, to Florence, to every place that needs your truth. But you'll always come back here. That's enough." He took her hands, his voice low. "You are not like anyone I've ever known." "Nor you," she said. "Perhaps that's why we found each other in the middle of ruin." The sun slipped lower, bathing them in amber light. He brushed a lock of hair from her face. "Clara, may I ask you once more, not for permission, but for hope? Hope? That you'll let me build a life beside you, as your equal, not your savior." "You've never been my savior," she said. "You were simply the first man who saw me as more than my name." He smiled. "Then perhaps we save each other." Their hands intertwined, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was filled with everything they didn't need to say. The weight of the past, the promise of what would follow. When he finally bent to kiss her, it was gentle, reverent, like a vow spoken without words. The first stars appeared as they walked back toward the house. The workers were gone, the baskets stacked by the wall. A lantern glowed in the doorway. Alessandro paused, looking at the small, warm light. "It feels like home," he said. "It is," she replied. Inside, she poured wine from the first pressing. The scent filled the air, rich and new. She handed him a cup. "To my mother," she said. He lifted his. "To Truth." They drank, smiling. The room was simple. Wooden beams, stone floor, a single window overlooking the vines. But to both, it felt like a palace. He set the cup down. "I once thought nobility was measured by birth," he said. "Now I see it measured by heart." "And what of pride?" she asked. "Pride is what we unlearn to love honestly." She laughed softly. "Then we'll both be students forever." "Gladly," he said. They sat together until the candles burned low. Outside, the night pulsed with the rhythm of crickets and the whisper of leaves. Alessandro reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Do you ever think your mother sees this?" "I do," she said. "I think she smiles every time the vineyard breathes again." He looked at her with quiet affection. "She would be proud of you." "She'd say I talk too much," Clara replied, and they both laughed. The laughter faded into a comfortable stillness. She rose, moving to the window. The moonlight poured over the fields, turning every leaf to silver. Alessandro joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "I never thought I'd find peace here," he said. "Peace doesn't come from places," she answered. "It comes from people who stand with you when the world falls apart." He took her hand again. "Then I've found mine." Morning came with light spilling through the shutters. Clara woke to the sound of birds and the scent of fresh bread baking in the hearth. Alessandro was already outside, speaking with the workers, laughing easily as if he'd belonged there all his life. She watched him from the window, warmth rising in her chest. Later, they gathered everyone in the courtyard for the festival of the harvest. The villagers arrived with baskets of fruit, flasks of wine, and songs that echoed across the hills. Clara stood at the center, dressed simply, but radiant. Alessandro, beside her, looked happier than she had ever seen him. When the music began, he turned to her with a half bow. "May I have this dance?" She hesitated, laughing. "I haven't danced since the night your Marquis mocked me." "Then let this night replace it," he said. She took his hand. They moved slowly at first, her laughter mingling with his. The others joined in, clapping, singing. The air was alive with joy. The memory of that cruel ballroom seemed distant, almost like another life. As the dance ended, the crowd cheered. Alessandro looked at her with that same steady warmth that had carried her through every storm. "You once said, 'Dignity must be proven by courage,'" he reminded her. "Tonight, you've proven it beyond measure." She smiled. "And love?" "Love," he said, "is the courage to stay." When the sun dipped behind the hills, they walked together to the vineyard, the laughter fading behind them. The rows glowed faintly in the twilight, each grape a small promise fulfilled. "I used to hate this place," Clara said quietly. "I thought it held only pain." "And now?" he asked. "Now it feels like forgiveness." He took her hands. "Then let it bear witness," he said, "to all we've lost and all we've found." She nodded, tears bright in her eyes. "To everything reborn." They stood together as the stars gathered above. the night deep and kind. The vineyard stretched endlessly before them, alive again. Alessandro brushed a thumb across her cheek, his voice low. "Clara Benedetti, would you let me call this place ours?" She looked up at him, her heart full. "It already is." And as the first breeze of autumn whispered through the vines, he kissed her again, not with sorrow or longing, but with the quiet certainty of love that had earned its peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.